The twin moons of Galvanar glowed above the great Colosseum. Inside metallic walls, thousands of voices echoed, all chanting one name. Their fists hit their chests as they called for their champion, a warrior who had never tasted defeat. She stood tall, covered in glowing black armor, holding her long blade with pride. Across the arena, a human male stepped forward. His clothes were dusty. His face had no fear. He looked like a man who didn't belong in this kind of place. No one cheered for him. The crowd just laughed. The king had summoned him as a joke, a lesson to show that humans were weak. The alien warrior was ordered to humiliate him, to crush his pride before the people. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He only gripped the wooden shaft of his broken spear tighter. His eyes stayed locked on the alien woman, who walked like royalty. She smirked beneath her mask. She had ended giants, burned warlords, and danced through gunfire. And now, she was told to toy with this man. The king leaned forward from his throne. His golden armor reflected the light of the arena. His voice thundered across the stone. Make him kneel, break his will. Show them all what it means to stand against our bloodline. The people roared again. It was not a fight they expected. It was entertainment. They had seen too many humans fail. This one was no different. Or so they thought. A loud drum echoed once. It was a signal to begin. The alien warrior charged forward, her sword raised high. She moved like lightning, armor shining with each step. The human stood still, his feet firm on the ground. He waited, not a blink, not a breath wasted. He moved only when her blade was inches from his head. With one sudden motion, he shifted to the side, letting the blade pass his shoulder. The crowd gasped. She spun fast, bringing the sword down again, this time aiming for his leg. He blocked it, not with strength, but with angle. The spear shaft cracked in half, but the force moved the blade away. He stepped in, too close for her to swing again. His hand struck her shoulder. The armor cracked. She stumbled back, eyes wide. She had never been touched before in battle. Her pride flared. She screamed and swung wildly. He ducked low, swept her legs, and she fell to ground with a thud. The silence in the arena was sharp. People leaned forward. Their cheers stopped. The king's face twisted in confusion. The human stood tall now, holding only a splintered stick. But in that moment, he looked like a storm ready to rise. The alien warrior pushed herself up, her chest armor broken, sparks flickering from her side. She stared at him now with something new. Not anger, not shame. Something closer to curiosity, or maybe respect. The human didn't press forward. He waited. He gave her a chance to stand. And that gesture made the silence louder than any scream could. A single drop of blood rolled down her lip as she removed her helmet. Her eyes glowed, but her voice was quiet. "What are you?" she asked. The human's answer came with no sound. Only a look, one that said he had nothing to prove. Not to her. Not to anyone. The crowd was still frozen, unsure what they had just witnessed. No one expected the human to even last a minute. Now he stood over the most feared warrior of their empire, and she was the one bleeding. Guards looked to the king for direction. He did not speak. His fingers gripped the arms of his throne tighter. His pride had been wounded in front of thousands, and by a man he believed to be nothing. The alien woman got to her feet slowly. Her breathing was heavy. Her armor sparked again at the shoulder. The crowd saw something they had never seen before, hesitation in her eyes. She stared at the man like she was seeing him for the first time, not as a weak creature to break, but as a true opponent. She raised her sword again, slower this time. No flash, no rush, just focus. The human held no weapon now, only a broken stick in one hand, and his calm gaze in the other. He didn't step forward. He didn't need to. The battle was no longer about strength. It was about truth. The alien warrior charged again. This time, she did not roar. She was quiet, precise. Their clash was like thunder, steel meeting bone, armor scraping against the floor. But he moved like wind, not water. She swung her sword wide. He ducked. She kicked. He leaned. His body moved with such control, as if he had danced this fight in his dreams before it began. His hand struck her again, this time to her ribs. Her armor shattered further. A plate fell off and slid across the floor. The crowd gasped. They had never seen her lose even a step in combat. Now she was losing ground fast. The king stood now. His voice echoed through the air. Enough. Finish it. Show him what it means to defy our house. But her eyes didn't leave the human, and her ears didn't hear her king's voice. For the first time in her life, she doubted an order, not because she feared punishment, but because something inside her had changed. This wasn't about orders anymore. It was about something deeper. She lunged forward with a scream, swinging her blade with all her weight. The human didn't dodge this time. He stepped in. His hand caught her wrist mid-strike. Her eyes widened as the sword dropped. In one motion, he spun her and brought her to her knees, not with pain, not with force, but with understanding. He whispered something that only she heard. Her head dropped as silence fell again. The crowd did not cheer. They didn't know what to do. The greatest warrior of their kind had been disarmed, broken, and yet not harmed. It was not victory they saw. It was transformation. The king's face twisted in rage. He raised his hand to give the order. Guards, end him now. But before the words could finish, the alien warrior stood up again, raising her hand to silence him. Her helmet rolled away on the floor. Her face was visible now, beautiful, fierce, and covered in dirt and blood. But her eyes were not full of hate anymore. They held something else, something lost and found. She turned to face the king. Her voice was strong and clear. He is not your toy. He is not your shame. He is your warning. The crowd gasped again, but none dared interrupt. The king's mouth fell open, but no words came. For the first time in his reign, someone had disobeyed him not in fear, but in honor. And worse, the people were watching with respect in their eyes. The air inside the arena felt heavier. No one moved. No one cheered. The king's warrior had just stood against him, and the human had not even raised a real weapon. The king clenched his jaw, his golden rings catching the torchlight. His voice was quiet but sharp. Guards, remove them both. His pride had been torn in front of the empire. He would not allow the wound to deepen. The alien guards stepped forward, but their feet were slow. They were confused. None of them had ever seen the king challenge like this, and none had seen the champion falter. The alien warrior turned her body, placing herself between the human and the guards. Her sword still rested on the ground, but her stance was strong. Her voice rose through the silence. He is not the enemy. Your pride is... Gasps echoed through the crowd. The king stood, his face red with rage. You dare question my rule? I made you what you are. You owe me your blood and blade. The human finally stepped forward. His movements were calm. He looked up at the king, then at the people. She doesn't owe you. None of them do. His words were simple, but they struck deep. The crowd murmured. Some looked at each other. Some lowered their heads. The king's image had been perfect for years. Now a single human and his defiant warrior had cracked it wide open. You will die for this, the king hissed. His voice shook the high walls. But his threats no longer sounded powerful. They sounded scared. The strength of his rule was built on fear. That fear was fading. The alien warrior did not back down. Her eyes, once burning with the king's fire, now held something gentler. Then let me die beside someone who fights with honor, she said as she stood shoulder to shoulder with the human. The guards hesitated. Their boots scraped against the floor. They looked at one another, waiting for someone else to make the first move. The people behind them began to rise from their seats, slowly, unsure of what came next. The human looked up toward the sky. It was artificial, a digital dome projecting stars and moons. Still, he found peace in it. He spoke without turning his head. They don't want to fight us. They're just afraid to choose. The alien warrior nodded, her voice softer now. They were trained to obey, not to question. But truth doesn't need orders. It only needs someone to say it first. From the crowd, a young alien stood. He was barely more than a boy. He raised a fist, not in salute to the king, but to the warrior. Then another stood. Then 10 more. Then hundreds. Silence turned to energy. The king shouted for silence, for loyalty, for control. But his voice drowned beneath the sound of footsteps and rising voices. The people were not chanting his name anymore. They were chanting hers. The human placed a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't just your fight anymore," he said. She nodded again, her armor still cracked, her body still bleeding, but her spirit rising higher than it ever had before. The throne that once looked so far above now looked small. The king stepped back. He had never feared his people before. But now, with their eyes wide open, he saw what true power looked like. The king's robes flowed behind him as he stepped down from his throne. Each step echoed with metal and anger. He was not used to walking among commoners. He had ruled from above for too long. The people parted but did not kneel. Their eyes no longer showed fear. Some looked with curiosity, some with courage. A few turned away, ashamed of the loyalty they once gave him without question. The alien warrior stood tall beside the human. Her body was bruised and cut, but her eyes were sharp. She was no longer just a fighter. She had become something more. "I raised you," the king growled as he stopped before her. "I gave you armor, status, glory, and this is how you thank me." His voice was full of pride, not pain. He could not understand betrayal. "You gave me orders," she answered calmly, "but I earned every victory. You made me a weapon, not a person." He reminded me who I used to be. She pointed at the human. He did not flinch. His clothes were still torn. Dirt covered his skin, but his back was straight, and his silence spoke louder than any speech. The king's eyes narrowed. "You think you are strong because you stood against me? You're nothing without the people's fear, and they will remember that." Suddenly, from the far end of the arena, a gate opened. Soldiers poured in, fully armed and armored. The king had summoned his private guard, his most loyal force. The crowd gasped but did not flee. Many stood their ground. The tension spread to the air like fire. But the human stepped forward, placing himself between the soldiers and the people. He raised one hand, not as a threat, but as a sign of peace. "You don't have to follow this. You know what's right. You know who really fights for you." The lead soldier paused. His armor shone with the king's emblem. He looked at the human, then at the warrior, then back at the king. His weapon did not rise. One by one, the soldiers behind him slowed. They did not kneel, but they did not attack. Their loyalty wavered. The people's eyes gave them strength to hesitate. The king roared with fury. "You dare turn your backs on your blood oath? I will erase every one of you. I am the crown. I am the empire." But his words hit empty air. Power built on fear fades fast when fear is gone. And right now, no one feared him. Not the crowd. Not the soldiers. Not even the warrior he once owned. The alien warrior stepped closer to him. Her voice was low. "You were a king of shadows. But the light always finds a way in." The crowd cheered. Not loud, not wild, but steady, like the start of a storm. It was not the end. It was a beginning, and it started with her. The human did not raise his hand to strike the king. He didn't need to. The king had already fallen in the hearts of his people. That fall could not be reversed. The king looked around, at the crowd, at his guard, at his crumbling rule, and for the first time, his eyes showed what they had never shown before. Fear. The king stepped backward, his hands trembling. The armor that once made him look powerful now seemed too heavy. The golden crown on his head no longer shone the same way. The alien warrior turned and faced the crowd. Her voice rose with confidence. "You were taught to fear. But look around. Look at each other. You were never weak. You were just never allowed to be strong." People looked at one another. Some nodded. Some lifted their fists. The silence of submission had been broken. Their voices were waiting to be used. The human stood still, letting her speak. He knew this wasn't his moment. It belonged to her. She had been the king's sword, but now she was something else. A girl near the front called out, her voice clear. "What now? If we don't serve him, who do we follow?" It was not a question of fear. It was a question of hope. The warrior looked around the arena. Her eyes moved over faces old and young. "You don't need to follow anyone," she said. "You need to stand together. You need to build something better." The guards lowered their weapons fully. Some of them removed their helmets. They looked at the crowd not as tools of control, but as their own people. The king shouted again. "They are nothing without command. They are lost without rule. I gave them purpose. I gave you all order." His voice cracked in the middle. It no longer held command. It sounded like a man trying to hold sand in his hands as it slipped through his fingers. The human stepped closer to him. "No one is taking their freedom. They are taking it back themselves. You just can't stop them now." The king raised his hand as if to strike, but it fell before it reached anyone. There was no one left to obey him. No warrior at his side. No fear in the eyes around him. One of the royal guards walked forward. He placed a royal crest on the ground and stepped away from it. Then another did the same, and another, until the crest was buried under a pile of golden emblems. The king sank to his knees. His eyes stared blankly at the dust-covered arena floor. All he had built had collapsed, not from blades, but from truth. The alien warrior approached him. She did not strike. She did not mock. She knelt and placed her sword on the ground before him. "I was your weapon. Now I choose who I fight for. And I choose them." The people roared. It was not wild. It was not angry. It was strong. It was united. It was the sound of a future being born in the ashes of pride. The human helped her stand. His touch was gentle, and she accepted it, not as a gesture of ownership, but of respect. Their eyes met with quiet understanding. Together, they walked forward. The crowd made way for them. No orders were given. No laws were shouted. But everyone knew something important had changed. The king remained on his knees, forgotten in the middle of the place where he once ruled with fear. The arena slowly emptied as the people left in silence. It was not the silence of fear, but of thought. Something powerful had ended, and something unknown was beginning. The alien warrior walked beside the human through the lower tunnels of the Colosseum. Her steps were slower now. Her injuries were catching up with her, but her eyes still burned bright. He stayed close, saying nothing. She didn't need words. His presence was enough. For the first time, she felt what it was like to be seen not as a weapon, but as a person. They reached a small chamber below the arena. The air was cool. The noise above was now faint. It was a place once used to prepare warriors for battle. Now it felt like a place to rest. She sat on a stone bench and removed the last pieces of broken armor. Beneath it, bruises and cuts painted her skin. She winced but did not cry out. Pain was nothing new to her. The human found clean cloth and a small water unit. He knelt before her and gently cleaned her wounds. She watched him, her expression calm but curious. No one had ever treated her with such care. "Why did you come here?" she asked. Her voice was soft now. Not a challenge, but a real question. One filled with more than curiosity. It carried something deeper. He paused before answering. "Because I heard stories. Stories of a place ruled by fear. Stories of a woman turned into a blade. And I knew someone had to remind her she was more than that." She looked down at her hands. Hands that held swords, ended lives, and followed cruel orders. Now they trembled not from battle, but from truth. Her voice cracked slightly. "You reminded me." They sat in silence for a while. The human wrapped her shoulder in cloth. He moved with purpose, but without force. Everything he did was careful, as if honoring something sacred. Footsteps echoed down the hall. A group of young fighters entered. They had once trained under the king's rule. Now they looked at her not with fear, but with hope. One stepped forward. "We don't want to fight for power anymore. We want to protect. Teach us. Let us. Show us how to be better than what we were made to be." She stood slowly, her body tired but her heart awake. "Then start by learning who you are without orders. And if I am to lead, I will not lead with fear. I will lead with truth." The human stepped beside her, and I will stand with her. Not above, not ahead, but with her, until the day this world no longer needs blades to stay free. The young fighters saluted, but not in the way the old army had taught them. This salute was open-handed, a symbol of peace, not power, a sign of a new beginning. They left the chamber together. The human and the warrior walked at the front. Behind them followed those ready to unlearn fear and choose a better way. The fires of rebellion had not been started by hate. They had been started by a spark of courage and the strike of a broken spear. The capital city beyond the arena had started a change. Walls once decorated with the king's image were now bare. Banners that flew with his symbol were taken down without a fight. Shops reopened. Families stepped into the streets. No soldiers forced them into silence. People walked together, not with fear, but with cautious hope. It was like waking from a long, hard dream. The alien warrior stood at the top of the old war tower. Her eyes scanned the city she once helped control. Below her, children played where soldiers use a march. The human joined her quietly. He carried a bag of fruit, tossing her one without a word. She caught it with a grin. It was the first smile she had shown in days. "You're getting soft," he teased, watching her sit without armor for the first time. Her clothes were simple now. No lights, no metals, just fabric and skin. She took a bite and leaned back against a stone. Maybe softness is strength. Maybe it's harder to live in peace than to fight for it. He nodded. The truth in her words was heavy. It was easy to destroy, much harder to rebuild, but they had chosen a harder path. Below them, the group of young fighters trained under the rising sun. Their blades were not sharp. Their lessons were not in war. They learned patience, discipline, and choice. The warrior watched them carefully. She didn't want to make them into new soldiers. She wanted them to grow into protectors, thinkers, and voices. Suddenly, a loud signal echoed across the hills. A warning beacon flared from the southern tower. The old enemy had returned. Not loyalists. Something worse. A fleet of raiders had entered the outer territories. Pirates who smelled weakness in a world still healing. They didn't care about kings or rebellion. They wanted chaos. The human stood quickly, grabbing his gear. They won't wait. If we don't stand together now, all of this will fall. The warrior rose beside him. Then we show them that peace is not weakness. We show them that unity is stronger than steel. She summoned the young fighters. Their eyes burned with fear, but also courage. They had trained for this moment, not to kill, but to defend what was finally becoming home. The villagers gathered supplies, secured families, and prepared the city. No one ran. No one hid. Even those who had never fought before stood ready with tools in hand. Ships darkened the sky by nightfall. Engines roared above the mountains. The raiders had arrived, expecting silence. Instead, they met a wall of people who refused to bow. The human took his place at the gates, the warrior beside him. Together, they stood as a symbol, not of war, but of what had been earned through struggle. As the first shot fired from above, the people of the city did not break. They rose with shields, with fire, with voices louder than fear. They had torn down a king, but now they had to defend the future, and they would not let it be stolen. The sky lit with flames as the first wave of raider ships descended. The peaceful city stood its ground, shields raised, hearts steady. They had prepared for this moment, not with hate, but with purpose. Energy blasts struck the city walls, shaking the stone and steel. But they held. What was once a symbol of control now stood as a shield for hope. The people did not scatter. They moved as one. The alien warrior led the defense from the front. Her blade was no longer a tool of the king. It now moved to protect the innocent. She struck not for glory, but for those who stood behind her. Beside her, the human fought with fierce focus. He no longer needed a name. His actions were his identity. Each strike he made kept another life safe. Young fighters ran messages, helped the wounded, and guarded the weak. The training they received was not for war, but it had made them ready. They were no longer just students. They were protectors. The raiders pushed harder, sending down machines of metal and fire. But for every weapon they brought, the people brought more courage. Fear tried to rise, but unity kept it down. In the center of the city, old soldiers from the king's army joined the defense. They had once served power. Now they served something greater. They served peace. The warrior moved like lightning, her armor patched but her strength unbroken. She brought down enemy after enemy, each fall a message that this place would not be taken. The human was surrounded at one point. A blast threw him to the ground. Before the enemy could strike again, two villagers stepped in front of him. One held a farming tool, the other a broken shield. Together they drove the attacker back. The human stood again, nodding to them with respect. They had not been trained to fight, but they had learned to stand. Hours passed. The sky turned dark with smoke, but the city still stood. And slowly, the tide began to turn. The raiders had not expected such resistance. Their numbers began to fall. From the sky, their ships began to retreat. One by one they pulled back. They came for weakness, but found a wall of fire. The people had sent their answer. The final blast echoed in the hills. Then silence returned. But it was not the silence of fear. It was a calm after the storm, the kind that only comes when something worth protecting has been saved. The people gathered in the central square. No leaders were needed to tell them what they had done. They looked at one another and saw victory written on every face. The alien warrior stepped forward, her blade in hand. She raised it high, then placed it down at her feet. "Let this be the last time it is raised in war," she said. The human placed his hand on her shoulder. "Let it be raised in stories instead, so no one forgets what it took to become free." Cheers rose, not wild but strong. They were not ruled by fear anymore. They were led by memory, truth, and the promise of peace. The king's throne remained empty. No one spoke of him. No one needed to. His power had faded without the need for chains. The human and the warrior stood side by side. Their journey had begun with a strike, but it ended with something far greater, a world reborn.